Our speaker tonight is Mr. Robert Sabetay. Is that correct?
Right.
I did get it right. Mr. Sabetay fought with the 3rd Army, 90th Infantry, and the artillery at the Battle of the Bulge. His first day on the job found him fighting in 5 firefights. So he goes from novice to expert within the 24-hour period. He also fought in battles in northern France, the Ardennes, the Rhineland, and through Central Europe. So without any further ado, Mr. Sabetay.
I landed on July 19th in Normandy, and at that time Normandy had been acquired, and I was in the field artillery, and we had to catch up with the Army. Well, I won't tell you about all those places that I was in, but anyway, we eventually ended up in a German town which was deserted, and we were bombarding Metz. We had 4.5 artillery. At that time, we were on the 2nd floor of a deserted house, and we were operating a radio from the 2nd floor, and it got a little boring, so I organized a group to go through the town and find cuckoo clocks and other clocks, whatever they could find, and we brought them all in and mounted them on the walls, so around 12 o'clock we knew they were there. But later on they needed replacements, and I drew a straw to stay. Okay, I drew another straw. They had 3 drawings. All 3 times I drew a straw to stay, and they said, well, you're going. So they took me on the truck, and by that time they had captured Metz. The way they had captured Metz, we used to bounce the artillery shells off the fortification and say ricochet, ricochet when I was at headquarters on the radio. But the GIs took 5-gallon cans of gasoline and poured it down through the vent hose. Then they dropped a grenade in it, and they finally captured Metz. So I went to the captured Metz, and there was a sergeant there from the 95th Infantry who had to train us, give us some training in infantry tactics. So I was there about a week. And then they shipped me up to the Battle of the Bulge, 180 miles. And we were on what they called the Red Ball Express, which is run by black soldiers. The fellow that was driving the truck, his name was Ed Hewitt. He's still alive in Akron, Ohio. He used to deal with me. And I got on the back of the truck, and then they throw the duffel bags on, and I got underneath the duffel bags, mistakenly think I could keep warm, which I did, but the only problem I had, if we got strafed by aircraft, I couldn't get out. But they took us up to the front lines, and he dumped us off. And we went into battle immediately. Just went about what you call 2 city blocks, and we were in the battle. And as he mentioned, I went through 5 firefights the first day. I couldn't tell one firefight from another one, but he said there's 5 firefights. As I was moving up, there was a Sherman tank, and there was an officer on the corner of the Sherman tank like this, and he's waving everybody up. Everybody, you know, to go up, and there's one irritated GI ran back, and I'm going to get that SOB. But anyway, I went to the right front, and there's a little rise in the terrain. The tank was here. There was a GI off to the left front. I'm off to the right. And we were firing at some German way out in the middle of a clearing there. It was about 300 yards. And the officer put his glasses on, this fella, and he says, "That's the Red Cross fella. That's is a medic. Tell him to cease fire." And I mean, everybody's pouring fire on that poor guy. He was a German medic, and was attending a fallen German soldier. He was pretty brave. But while I was there, the Germans fired a Panzerfaust, which is a anti-tank grenade, and it fell short. And there was the fellow to the left front of the tank. He got critically injured. I happened to have my left hand up in the air for some strange reason. Something stung my forefinger. And I slowly brought it down and started bleeding. And I looked at it, and the glove was all bloody. So I gingerly took my glove off and looked. Yeah, I got nicked. Had shrapnel in there. There was no medics available, so I just said, well, I just go on about it. I went into several battles. We were crawling in the snow, and the snow would take the swelling down. It had swelled up about twice the size of my finger, like that. But I could still move it, so I said, well, you know, it's one of those things. So we moved up, and it was getting nighttime, and I was advancing with another fella. He had frozen feet. I said, "We need frozen feet." "Well, from my knees down, I can't feel anything." But I said, "You're running. How can you run?" He says, "Well, I can run." So we ran forward, and it was already dusk, and we came to a German slit trench or foxhole, and we dove in there. This foxhole was covered over with logs and also had dirt over that, and it was really a nice foxhole. The Germans built good ones, I'll tell you that. And General Patton says, you don't have time to build your own foxholes. You use the Germans, so we use the Germans. And all night long they bombarded us with screaming Mimis. Now a screaming Mimi is a rocket. And it has a whistle on the fin in the back. I don't know how many they fire at one time. It's about 8 or 10, I don't know. But they come screaming all over at the same time. They travel about 400 miles an hour. And sound travels about 746, so you could hear them coming. And we would scrooch down, and they would go off, and the shrapnel would fly around and make a noise like twang, like a Jew's harp, real bass noise. So we were there all night, and then about 4 o'clock in the morning, I hear a rumble, rumble, rumble. It was a German tank moving up. And as it turned out, it was a Tiger Royal, which had an 88 millimeter on its nose, a big long cannon. And I got scared, he got scared, because the story out was that they'd come over a foxhole and then they run the tracks back and forth until they crashed under it. So I was really frightened. But as it turned out, I heard a kapow, and then rumble, rumble, it stopped. And later on, we moved out, and here's this German Tiger tank up on the side of a hill, little rise, and it was pointed this way, and that cannon was dug into the ground, the muzzle of it. He had caught a broadside from a tank destroyer. Now we moved out through the woods, and then the officers were there, and they're saying, well, now you've got to go out that way, and there's a road that goes up in the hill, and you got to take that road. I said, fine. So we moved out. Was directing like this, pointing, to where we had to go. But the only problem was that officer, he got deer shot. If you know what a deer shot is, it comes in under one arm, goes through your body, comes out the other arm. And every time he lifted his arm, there's 2 spurts of blood would pour out, so he wasn't long for the world. New snow had fallen on the ground, and you couldn't take it maybe a yard or so, and it'd be cordite where the shell had landed, and it'd be all black, and so it was all around me. And I was going up the hill, and there's a fellow by the name of D. Pasquale, kind of dragging. And I kept on saying, go on, Di Pasquale, we got to get up there, we got to close with the enemy, they'll stop firing on us. So there was this road that went up the hill was about that high, that much higher than the surrounding terrain, and the fire was coming from the right, and I'm on the left of the road, so I had a little protection there. And I kind of wandered out a little bit too far, and a shell came in, and it exploded, and it drove me into the ground. And my knapsack just vibrated all the way down like that. It was so close. But anyway, American tank destroyers were there, and 2 of them were going up the hill. And that's what drew all the artillery fire, but they knocked out 2 German tanks that were on 2 revetments further up the hill. So then we continued up the hill, and I crossed over the road. Now I'm running, and I see 2 German rifles in the snow. And I come to a cutout in the side of the hill was a flat area, a little level place, and there's 2 German boys in German uniforms, like 13 and 14 years old. Probably they hit their youth, or Jungen as they call them. And you've never seen anybody frightened as those 2 boys were. They were turning black with fear like this, and all I had instructions not to take any prisoners. And the reason for that was the Germans, when they captured the Americans, they'd take them out and shoot them. And I said to myself, now am I going to be a judge, jury, and executioner, or what am I going to do? Well, I looked, and they're no danger to me. They're scared to death. They're only 13 and 14 years old. They have no weapons. They had thrown them away. So I went on, let somebody else make that decision. And I did hear 2 shots ring out, and I pitied them. Now, we ended up on the top of this hill. And on the top of the hill, there was a destroyer, a tank destroyer. And there was a fella, he was a replacement up there. He was discussing with me that there was a few 88 artillery shells came in that, well, we could be in the old where it landed. He says we could be there and they wouldn't hit us. I says, he was a fatalist, and I said, I don't think that's a good idea. And anyway, we were there till dark, and what happened, our canteens froze solid. It was pretty cold, about 10 degrees below zero. So we wanted some water, so in the tank they said, well, we have 5 gallons, but it was froze solid. So he took a blowtorch and he melted it down, and we got some water, but it tasted like kerosene. And later on in the evening, there was a German patrol coming up, and this guy on the tank cut loose with a 50, and they're coming up this road like that, and they peeled off both sides of that road when that 50 opened up. But we were there, and we had to get some sleep. Excuse me. And we took our shovel we got on our back, and you know, you could fold it down halfway so you make like a pick, and we start digging, and the surface of the ground was frozen. I don't know how many inches down. It was froze so solid that the shovel would bounce, or you hit a little rock, it would fly. So what we did, I got together with one fella, and I took my shelter half, and I put my blankets down, and he got in, and he put his 2 blankets over, and then the shelter half, and that's the way we slept. And we had body heat, so it was a little bit warm. But during the night, there's a guy by the name of Thomas. Just some character. He's about 35 years old. We don't know what he's doing in the Army. He's got false teeth. And his false teeth start chattering. And Thomas, shut up. The enemy will hear it. Oh, everybody got on him, but he couldn't. He was just cold. So anyway, the next morning they came and they said, we could go down and get some meals. They said, well, we're cut off. We wouldn't go down there. No. And so anyway, we stayed there, and while we were there, they sent up a relief outfit. And these guys came up, and we looked at them, and then we said to them, we should be relieving you instead of you relieving us, because they were a mess. I couldn't believe it. But so we got relieved, and we went on down the hill and went around, and went for quite a ways, and then we were on a road, and there was a high hill like this, and there was just a cutout road, just room enough for like one vehicle. And we went along this road, and we had to stop, and we were tired. It's nighttime, and so we leaned up against the hill and pulled our feet up, you know, with our knees, so there's room enough for someone to come down out of the vehicle. But I didn't care. That was about the last one on the road, and I stretched my legs out on the road. Here comes General Van Fleet in the Jeep. And I got my legs all stretched out there, and the Jeep stops. And he says, soldier, would you please move your legs? I just didn't care, so I pulled my knees up. And so we went on, and we had a few replacements. And one of the replacements I had, his name was Lou Finno, flicker from New York, which means that he used to pull the feathers from the chicken, the kosher chicken. And we had to go up this hill. It was like a mountain. It was pretty steep, and Lou was roly-poly and a little bit fat. And he's going up, and he can't go up the hill. He's on his stomach. It's stuck out. So, fell on one side, grabbed him by the collar, and I grabbed him by his other collar, and we just literally dragged him up that hill. And we went on, they said, well, now, we're going to come to a place where there's a rope, a big hemp rope, and it's dropped off over the cliff, and you go down the hemp rope, and then there's a path down there. I says, fine. So we come to this hill, and we start down this hemp rope. But the only problem was there's a German sniper across the valley, and the dirt was flying right near my head because he was firing at us, and I'm going down that rope, boy, I really was going down. But I got towards the bottom, and the rope ended, and it's still not at the bottom. And so I decided to drop off, so I dropped off and went down another 10 feet to the path. But there was a GI down there consoling a fella that had gone down before me, And this fellow was hollering and screaming, and he was in a lot of pain. And this GI had looked where he got shot between the legs. But I guess he got burnt down there. And it was pretty painful. He says, well, I can't see anything there. But anyway, he guided me to go off to the right, and I went off to the right. And so we got around the valley there, and we were there at night, and the next day, Reams, my sergeant, comes down, and he says, Sabetay Stern, who I just got to know, he's a nice young fellow, he left another outfit. I don't know what his problem, he was bucking to be something, but he's a very nice fella, and I just got to know him a little bit. He says, Stern is going to lead, and we're going to have 2 scouts, and I'm the radio operator, and I had a big radio on my back, and we got to go down the valley. And I says, well, that's suicide. They got German snipers up there, and I'm going to go down the valley. Yeah, you got to go down the valley. So there's 2 hills this way and the valley in between, and we got to go down this valley. And I said, well, what about you? He said, well, I got some other things to do. And I said, yeah. So we start out down the valley. The 2 scouts are out, and Stern is next, and me, the radio operator, is next, and we get out about 300-400 yards, and all of a sudden we stop. And I'm waiting there, and I'm waiting there, and nothing happens, and I can't figure out what's wrong. So pretty soon one of the scouts comes back, and I says, what's going on? He says, Stern is dead. He got shot between the eyes. What happened was he heard gunfire, and he's lifting his head, and being a green guy, he's looking around like this, and the guy zeroed in on him and shot him right between the eyes. So I radioed back, and I got a hold of Reams, and I said, Stern is dead. He says, come on back, mission accomplished. And I think, yeah, we were the bait. So I come back, and I found out that they used us for bait to draw the enemy fire, why they made a big encirclement and got them from behind. Well, later on that day, we went down the valley, and it was cold. Boy, was it cold. And it was so cold, one guy had a BAR, and it went off about 4 rounds with Buddha, 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 Buddha. It didn't go brrrr like that. It was cold. And we went on down the valley, and Reams, my sergeant, had given me instructions before we left. He says, now when we get to this Luxembourg town, he says, I want you to run up to the window and lob grenades in. And I says, me run up across the open field of fire and lob grenades? And he says, yeah. And I'm thinking, why pick me, you know? So we came to this town, and I spoke to Reams, and I said, well, when do I do this? And he says, well, you don't have to do it. I guess the Germans are more or less leaving or left. And this is the Battle of the Bulge. This is in the Ardennes. So a group of us, about 3 or 4, and we went around to the house and took the rifle butts and pounded on the wood door. Nobody answered. And I says, oh, come on. I said, let me fire through that door. We'll get in there, all right. No, 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 don't do that. Sabetay, there's liable to be someone there. So wiser heads prevailed, and just about that time, the door opens, and there's a tall Luxembourg guy, about 6 foot 4 inches tall, standing there. If I had fired that rifle, it would have killed him. And I just thank God that they had smarter guys than me. So what happened, we got warmed up. They had these China stoves, not stoves, but little furnaces, and they passed around some meat, salami, and you sliced it off, and we got warmed up, and we had salami, and it was really great. So we were there for a while, then we moved out, and we were up in some place, and we see all these 2.5-ton GMC trucks, American trucks, coming, a big convoy of them, and it looks like they're loaded with logs. But as it turned out, were dead GIs stacked up over the gunnels. A whole convoy of them. And so then we went on another little field trip there, and we came to this little farmyard, it was a group of buildings, and we had to go investigate that and take it. And before we went in there, Reams, my sergeant, said, well, we only have 8 men in the whole platoon. Instead of 3 squads, we'll make 2 squads, and there'll be 4 men in each. So it was 8 men. So we went in and we took it, and there was no resistance. But while we were there in the barn, Reams, being a resourceful guy, says, well, I'm going to look for some food. So he went out and he found some potatoes, and he found some lard, and peeled the potatoes, and we found the pot, and he had it boiling. We had French fries. And about that time, I got some mayo from home, and I don't know why I always got my mayo. Unbelievable. They sunk ships, but I got all my mayo. And they sent me some anchovies, and also sent me some anti-acid pills. And so I had the anchovies, and then I had the anti-acid pills. So when I went to the city, it went the other way. So anyway, we had an outpost out in the field, and they put Lucinowitz and me guarding up there. Someone else's guard, but it was our turn. But the only thing is, they left us up all night long. Nobody gave us any relief. And what happened, there was a German out there wailing and it's crying all night long. He's crying. And Lou looked at me and I looked at him and I said, you hear that? And he says, yeah, I hear it. And he says, I'm not going out there. I said, I'm not going out there either. Let him holler. So anyway, we got through the night. And let's see. The next thing we did, we went into the Siegfried line. So I remember Reams was leading us out in the Siegfried line, and there was a squad, and we got out there and was overlooking. It was on a little hill. Can't find the pillbox. Finally went back, and the next day we went out in the daylight and we found the pillbox. We had been standing on it that night. So we went in to the pillboxes, and in the Siegfried line there was a big 2-story house, and it had walls on it about that thick. And then it was at nighttime, and we had moved up. And so Reams and I got into this house. They had the headquarters there. They had a observation place, and there was other soldiers in there. And the Germans were shelling us with screaming Mimis. And finally, we were there, and one screaming Mimi come through the second floor, and I guess he was up. This one fellow was upstairs relieving himself, and he got blown from the second floor to the first floor with his pants down around his knees. So that kind of broke us all up over there. We got a good laugh out of that when it broke the tension. And Ream says to me, he says, Sabetay, he says, we got to go out. I says, why? He says, we lost the platoon. I said, what do you mean? He says, Thomas was behind you. Do you remember Thomas? So Thomas, the whole platoon disappeared. Now we have to go out and find him in no man's land. So we start out, we get out about 30 yards, 20, 30 yards, and Reem stopped and I stopped, and we hear these screaming memes coming in, several rockets. We turn around and bolt for that two-story building. We just get inside, he bowls me over, and those screaming memes landed right where we had been. Now, I got all kinds of weird stories, and they're true stories, because I had a guardian angel, believe me. So we had to go back out again. So we went back out again, and I said, well, where's your rifle? Well, he didn't want to tell me that, but he had dropped his rifle originally when we turned to run, and there's nothing left of the rifle but the front sight. It was a Garand. And I said, I need a front sight. Because mine was askew, you know, and I couldn't hit anything with it. So I picked it up and put it in my pocket. Now we start out obliquely the other way, off to the left. And we're running, and all of a sudden machine gun bullets start pop, 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 and right along our feet, the issues of dirt. There's a German slit trench, God bless the Germans. We dove into the slit trench. And as I dove in, the muzzle of my rifle dug into the mud. And Reem says, well, come on, we got to go. You know, they stopped firing. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. What do you mean? And I said, I got to clean my rifle. I had mud in the muzzle of it, and I can't fire it. He says, Seba, you're crazy. And I said, I know. So I cleaned my rifle, got it clean, and then we took off running again. So we're running, and they cut down on us a couple times, and then there's two big gate posts out in the middle of nowhere, no gates on them. They're about 3 or 4 feet wide and about 9 feet high and about, I don't know, 10 feet between them. And they cut down on us with a machine gun, and he got on the far one and I got on the near one, and it kicked up a lot of brick specks on the one side, but it protected us. They were pretty thick. So finally we went on and we found the platoon with Thomas. And they said, what were you guys doing? Well, we're in this pillbox. I guess the Germans had abandoned it. And he said they had a German machine gun and we were firing it. You can guess who they were firing at. So we went back. And I had so many stories there, I got to find the right one. Let's see. And past there, and past there, past there. Well, I'll just have to wing it. Anyway, we have to go into the C3 line further, and Reams is with me, and we get out into where they got these big crosses, anti-tank crosses and stuff, big concrete things, obstructions, and Reams has Mother Nature call. And the tracers are flying around there and ricocheting off of the concrete, and he says, I gotta go. I said, well, go ahead, Reams, I'll stay here and protect you. I mean, Mother Nature. So we did that. All in sequence. Let's see if I can find it, jog my memory so I have it in the right sequence. So bear with me a minute. Oh, I know what happened now. we went into the Siegfried line, and there was a lot of empty fortifications, pillboxes, and we went into one, and it was empty, and they had left a pile of German blankets on the side there, and they sent food up to us, and it was chicken, and I was eating the chicken, and the skin tasted salty, it didn't taste right. But anyway, I was going to bunk down that night, so I thought I'd use a German blanket. But before I did, I had some Quinzana powder, I think that's how you pronounce it, and I very liberally sprinkled it all over that blanket before I got in it. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was supposed to go out and guard duty, and I woke up, and I was sick as a dog. I had ptomaine poisoning. So I went out to see my buddy, and Maxwell Ivy. I got to tell you a story about him too. I went out of the pillbox. I says, "Ivy, I'm sick." And he said, "Well, why don't you go sleep it off, bud?" I said, No, it's better outside. The air is better." He says, "Okay." I said, "Well, where would the Germans be coming from?" He says, "Over by that tree there." I looked and I says, "Which tree? There's 4 trees out there." He says, "You are sick." I said, "Well, just point me in the direction. I'll pull the trigger if anybody comes." The next morning, I was all right. Go back into the pillbox with the other guys, and they got bit by lice that night. And I'm the only guy that didn't get bit by lice because they didn't put any powder on. And I got to tell you about Ivy. Prior to this, we got replacements. And the replacements are going in the snow. And you see the line of march. Their gas masks were there, the food was there, blankets were there, and you had a whole trail through the snow. You had green troops. Now, Ivy came up to me and had a sheepish grin on his face and said, "Hey, you got an extra blanket?" And I said, "Well, what happened to your blanket?" And he said, he didn't want to answer. And I says, "Your blanket's out there in the snow where all the green troops dropped everything, isn't it?" And he wouldn't answer me. So as it turned out, I took pity on him and gave him one of my blankets. And I taught him how to dress. And the way we dressed, we had our summer underclothes on, and then our winter underclothes on, and then we had our woolen shirt on and a woolen sweater on, and a fatigue jacket on top of that, and we layered our clothes. And at night, when it was so cold, they taught us that you take your socks off at night to keep your feet warm, because 60% went back with trench foot was nothing more than frozen feet. And we take it off and wring the water out, and then we stick it next to our belly or under our armpits, and that night we'd change it, put on dry socks. So I taught him the ropes. I asked him what happened to him. He says, "I got busted out of OCS." And I don't know what he did to get busted out of OCS. It must have been pretty serious. Anyway, we became friends, and we were in the Siegfried line, and when I was running through the Siegfried line, we came to one pillbox, and I had a bayonet, and it was in my way for close-in fighting, so I didn't want to carry it, so I stuffed it in a crack in one of the pillboxes. And we were going back, and I decided to go back and get it. And so I'm going back, and there's this pillbox there, and there's like a garden out there. I'm walking through the center of the garden like this, very innocent, and I happen to look down, and what do I see? Streams going this way, that way, every which way. I said, oh my God, I'm in a minefield. I got halfway through and I'm thinking, okay, I'm in a minefield. I got this far. Do I try to walk backwards through there? And when you're walking backwards, you don't know where you're going. Well, I could turn around, but I decided I was closer to the end of it. I'm going to walk all the way through. I weighed about 140 pounds, and I had these combat boots on, and I chanced it, and I made it all the way through that minefield. And I got to the pillbox, I found my bayonet, but also there was a German soldier that was dead, was lying out there. I'd seen him before, but every time I saw him, he was in a different position. And the reason was everybody come back would rifle him to see what he had. And so I went on back, and then later on I remember Ivy, we were near some place there, and he was in the Siegfried line, and he was practicing fire with a sawed-off 45, was a little machine gun, and it was out about, a little bit beyond that door there. And he's firing at it, and it's going all the way around. It's a K-ration tin out there. He was practicing. I says, Ivy, get rid of that. And I took my M1 and I lifted it up, shot one shot up there, and it blew 20 feet in the air. And that's one of the things. I could tell you some more stories. I got a lot more. I got to think of these stories. We were up in the mountains someplace, and it was a ski resort. And it was a modern building, and we were in this building, and they had thermopane windows. I never knew what a thermopane window was. It's two pieces of glass, it's like insulated. And they left some woman there, I don't know, she got left over when the Germans left. And we were there for a while and had a little rest. Then we started back down, going down the hill, and they had a ski thing where you shoosh down and go off. And we're out in this snow-covered hill, and we're going down, and the whole company's going. And all of a sudden, the shot rings out, and the GI falls over dead. Everybody stopped. One shot. It wasn't a machine gun or anything, just one shot, and one GI died. So they sent a squad back. And we waited, and eventually they came back, and they said, well, what was it? What happened? And he said, well, there's a church there, and we went up in the belfry. That's where the bell is, and it's high up. And we found a German 10-year-old kid in the belfry with a rifle. Well, that was the end of the kid. I hate to say it, but that's what happened. Okay, so now we move up, and we're going someplace, and Reams was with me, and there's a German lying on the ground with a German grenade. It's a masher in his right hand, and it's painted black, so he knew what kind it was, and he must have got shot in the head or something, and he's going like this, automatic. And Reem said, that's liable to go off and, kill somebody. He says, well, we ought to shoot him. We're going to shoot him. I thought that was sort of a strange thing to ask me. I mean, he was in the Flays Gap, and he had been in a lot of places. I said, oh, shoot him in the head, because he wanted to put him out of his misery. So he took a 45, a little 45 grease gun, and he shot him in the side of the head, and this German just keeps on going like that. He was dead, brain dead, but his body was still going. And he said, oh, let's get out of here. So we figured he would die. And we went on, and I passed the word back, is he dead yet? No, he's still alive. He did. Finally, he died. So now I'm up with the officer, the lieutenant, I think it was first lieutenant. We're going up this mountain, and we get up so far, and machine gun bullets, tracers open up from two different directions over our fannies, and we're lying in this path, which is a little bit lower than the surrounding terrain, so we had a little cover. And my first lieutenant officer was sick, got sicker than a dog. He's lying there throwing up, just horrible. There's a dog and the whole company strung out behind us, and we're sitting there, and then we got these tracers going over his rump, and I'm right with him, So I said, Lieutenant, I said, you're in no condition to lead us. Now, I was a PFC at the time. And he gave me an argument, and I says, look, we got the whole company strung out. We got to take our objective, and you're no condition to lead us. I'm going to send back for Ivy. For some mysterious reason, Ivy had said to me before we shoved off, he said, if anything happens, send back for me. So I turned to the guy behind me and send back for Ivy. So Ivy eventually came up, and I assessed the situation and told him what was happening. He saw what was happening. He led us on, and we achieved our goal, our objective. He made battlefield commission later on. One time the Marine said to me, my sergeant said to me, he said, I want to make you a staff sergeant. Now, he had made me a PFC because when I come in, I was nothing but a private. And I said, no, I don't want to be a staff. Why? I says, we had 8 staff sergeants, and we lost all 8 of them. I don't want to be the 9th. I'll be the radio operator, because I get to go with the officer when we get a house someplace. And so we got our objective, and then when some other officers came up, and we had captured a bunch of German prisoners, and they were older men, and one of them, they were in the 35, 40 years old, maybe 45, escaped in the bottom of the barrel in the German army. And they told this one guy he was a replacement, he was a Section 8 replacement. He got busted out of someplace else, and they, replaced him for the infantry to throw him into the infantry. So they gave him these 8 guys, and they were nice. Man, the war was over. Americans have beautiful prisoner of war camps, I have to tell you that. And pretty soon he's gone with these guys, and then we hear boom, 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 boom. And 5 or 10 minutes later he comes back up. What happened? One tried to get away. Well, we felt that he had murdered those 4 guys, and nobody would talk to him. We gave him silent treatment. Why did they have to give us a Section 8 guy? He was Section 8. He just murdered him for no reason at all. The war was over, Oh, we had to cross the Moselle River, a second crossing they called it. And it was at night. And I said, how they were going to get across? Well, they're going to have a big barge. And it was a very steep hill. So we lined up on both sides of that barge, all steel barge, and please, I never felt anything so heavy as that barge, and we slipped and slid down the hill until we got to the river, and then we launched it in the river. By that time, I had had my boots replaced. Also, my father had sent me some 5-buckle Arctics, which I wore, and then they tore up. But then they replaced us with what they call boots that were, you could use them in cold weather, pretty good. And so we crawled into this. Anyway, we get this barge launched. I had snow packs on, that's what it was. And we pile into the barge and we're pedaling across the second crossing of the Moselle River, get out in the middle, and we hit a sandbar. We can't go. So what do we have to do? So we got to get out of the barge, and we got to wade across it. So I start wading, and I had these snow packs on, and they're airtight, and they're like balloons. This balloon up this way and this way, and then it had a leak, and then it started filling up with water. Now, all of a sudden, it got like lead, picking up lead. Anyway, we get across it, and we start up this vineyard. It's a hillside. And they were firing artilleries over our head to give us covering fire, and they started out about 600 yards beyond us. And someone got a bright idea in the artillery that instead of advancing the artillery, they would come back 100 yards and follow. They fired another volley. And they came back another 100 yards and they fired another volley. And finally they got to about 5 volleys, and Reams looks at me and he says, "Sabetay, that next volley is going to wipe us out to a man." And I get on the radio and I start screaming, "Ceasefire, for God's sake, ceasefire, do not fire." And they could tell I was really scared, but the volley never came. Thank God I got through to them. But that's what happened there. And we went up into the hills. And while we were up in the hills there, it got pretty high up. And someone had a little stove, I guess. You put a little pellet in and you light it and you make hot chocolate, but it wouldn't light because we were up so high. And we ended up in some little town. I got to tell you this is an interesting story. And there was a castle there. And in this town, I came to a house was right on the corner of about 3 streets, I don't know, 3 or 4 streets that all came together, and this house had a commanding view of it. And Reem says, "Sabetay says, I want you to toss a grenade in the basement." So I said, "Okay," but the only grenade I had was an incendiary grenade. Now, an incendiary grenade, when it goes off, it just burns a hole right through you. It's hell. It's awful. But that grenade was on my lapel, and I used to run, and one time it chipped my tooth, and the pin was loose, and so I thought, well, I'll bend the pin back just in case it falls out. But then I had to bend it back again when I went into combat. So I bent it back, and so I took this big grenade, it's pretty big, and took it off my lapel, and I got my finger in the pin, and I'm pulling, I can't pull the grenade pin out. He says, "Oh heck, let's get out of here." So we went on, and we secured the town, and there was a castle. There's other stories there too. And Reams came to me, he says, "Hey, remember when I told you to throw that grenade in the basement?" And I says, "Yes." He says, "I found out all the women and children were gathered in that basement." He didn't know it. So God was watching over me. You know how I would have felt if I'd have killed all those innocent people. It'd have been horrible. War is hell. And maybe I'll just give you about 5 minutes more of this stuff, okay? Because we have to get out of here. This happened later on. We were running in an open field, and we're dispersed out all over, and we're supposed to be firing from the hip. It was like cowboys, you know, this is great, firing from the hip, yeah. And we got out there, and I couldn't fire. I saw a German, I couldn't fire. There's too many people in front of me. I might hit one of my own men. And as I'm running forward, and we're, you know, the bullets are whistling past, pop, and then you hear a report of the rifle whistling past my ear, and it wasn't any fun. There's a guy up in front, just about where she is there, and he's running back towards me. And the adrenaline kicked in, and I got so angry. He got up to about where it was, and I stopped him like that. I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going back." I said, "No, you aren't." He says, "Yes, I am." And I slapped him across the face and backhanded him that way. And I swung him around, twirled him around, and I kicked him in the butt. And I said, "You're going that way, and I'm right behind you." I figure if I got my life up on there, he's going to have his too. And with that story, I'll just leave it. I have many other stories, but I don't think there's enough time to tell them all.
What were you referring to when you said a pillbox?
A pillbox is a German fortification in the Siegfried Line. It was a square fortification that had slits where they fired out. And after we had taken the pillboxes, the engineers came up and they were blowing them up. And when they blew it up, the roof would lift up and turn upside down and fall.
Maybe you could tell what the Siegfried Line was.
The Siegfried Line was built by the Germans as against the French. The French had the Maginot Line, they had the Siegfried Line. But they were understaffed and they didn't have too many people there. Where we ran into a lot of fighting was in the Ardennes, and there was a lot of things going on in there. It's pretty horrible. I will tell you this: when we fought in the Ardennes for 52 consecutive days, and we finally got relieved. And we got relieved. I got a shower after 52 days, and I got in that shower, and I didn't want to get out. They had a portable shower. Luxembourg, and also we were in Belgium too, right near there. I was in one town. I don't know if you call it a town, but I fought through there. I fought through 5 countries. I was in France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Czechoslovakia. I was a total of 2.5 years, believe it or not.
2.5 years.
And also, when the war was over, I was in the Army of Occupation. I had charge of a city. Also, we guarded a gas dump. One section caught on fire and blew up. They flew in the whole hospital, but nobody needed them. And I saw a lot of things, unbelievable.
Other than a hand injury and a chipped tooth, did you sustain any other injuries?
No, but I'll tell you what that finger did for me. This finger here, it's got a piece of shrapnel in there. I needed 15 points to get out of the Army. Wait a minute, I got wounded. I got a Purple Heart. I got out of the Army.
How old were you when you were in the Battle of the Bulge?
I was about 19. I went in in 43 in May. I was 18, and then I turned 19 and 20. I turned 20 after November in the Battle of the Bulge.
Air cover.
Yeah, there was some area. I used to see a lot of bombers going over, B-17s. I could tell you about a Focke-Wulf when I was in the artillery. I don't know if I got enough time though. I do? Well, I was in the artillery and we were in this little cutout and there was a bridge over this little river and there was a hill on 3 sides of us and there was a half track with 450s as, you know, protection. And this Focke-Wulf 190, it's a real fast plane, it's a radio engine plane. He come flying over about 300 miles an hour and there was a guy on one end of the bridge and the guy on another, and the one on end of the bridge, he fired low when the plane came and the other guy fired high when it went over. And those 450s just sat there. They never got a chance to move because he went zip like that. And they nailed him. He was spewing smoke and he went behind a hill. I think he might have crashed.
Shot him down.
Shot him down with M1s. Not the 450s, but the M1s.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you went through basic training and what you did?
Oh yeah, I was in Camp Bowie in Texas. Well, I got a lot of stories out there. Also, this outfit was a good old boys, a bunch of hillbillies from West by God, Virginia. And they didn't like my ethnic background. And I never got a furlough home, and I arranged one. I went out of that outfit so bad, so I ended up, I applied for the Air Force, and I was an air cadet for a short time until they found out I had sinus trouble and they got shipped back. But I had a lot of experience in the States, and some of them are very funny.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Bob, for being here. Thank you again for your service.